There was a time when everyone had a BlackBerry. I remember this. You probably do too. That clicking sound when someone was typing on those tiny keys. The red light blinking when you had a message. By 2007, they called it crackberry addiction, and it was real. Barack Obama fought the Secret Service to keep his. Oprah called it her favorite thing. You had to have one if you worked in business, politics, or anywhere that mattered. The device that made email mobile. That made you reachable anywhere, anytime. That changed how the world worked. So what happened to BlackBerry? 2012. BlackBerry was at the absolute peak of its power. 80 million subscribers worldwide. 50% of the American smartphone market belonged to them. $5.2 billion in quarterly revenue. Not for the year, for 3 months. The company that started in Waterloo, Ontario had become a global empire. Walk into any airport, any corporate office, any government building, and you would see them everywhere. Those distinctive rectangular devices with physical keyboards that clicked when you typed. But this was not just about the hardware. BlackBerry had created something unprecedented. A closed ecosystem that made their devices essential. BlackBerry Messenger, or BBM, connected 60 million people in a private network. It had read receipts years before anyone else. Group messaging that actually worked. For teenagers, BBM was their Facebook. For executives, it was how real business got done. The government loved BlackBerry because of its military-grade encryption. It was the only smartphone approved for classified communications. Even the president used one. And then there was the enterprise server. BlackBerry Enterprise Server, or BES, was the invisible engine that powered it all. Companies paid $99 per user per year just for the privilege of connecting BlackBerry devices to their email systems. It was recurring revenue that seemed unstoppable. Wall Street was paying attention. At its peak in 2008, BlackBerry was worth $83 billion. The company employed 17,500 people in Waterloo alone. They had transformed a small Canadian university town into Silicon Valley North. This was the golden age, and it felt like it would last forever. What made BlackBerry work was not just the device, it was the entire system they had built around it. Co-founders Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie had created something revolutionary, the push email technology that made messages appear instantly on your phone. In 2000, that felt like magic. Before BlackBerry, you had to dial into your email server and wait for messages to download. BlackBerry made email live in your pocket. But the real genius was the business model. Most technology companies sold you a product once and hoped you would buy the next version. BlackBerry sold you a subscription to connectivity itself. Every message that reached your BlackBerry traveled through their servers in Waterloo. Every corporate customer paid annual fees for the privilege. They had built a toll road for digital communication, and everyone who wanted to do serious business had to pay to use it. The security was real. BlackBerry's encryption was so advanced that governments around the world either embraced it or tried to ban it. In the United States, it became the standard for federal agencies. The Secret Service, the FBI, the Pentagon. If it mattered, it ran on BlackBerry. Mike Lazaridis was obsessed with the physical keyboard. He believed absolutely that typing on a touchscreen would never work for professional use. You needed those tiny keys, the tactile feedback, the ability to type without looking at the screen. He was not wrong about the typing. Professional BlackBerry users could compose emails faster than most people could type on a computer. The keyboard was not just a feature, it was a philosophy. And that philosophy made BlackBerry rich. But philosophies can become prisons. What made you great can also make you blind to what comes next. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and changed everything. The iPhone. A device with no keyboard, no stylus, just a big touchscreen that responded to your finger. When Jim Balsillie, BlackBerry's co-CEO, saw the presentation, he was not worried. He told his colleagues, "It is okay, we will be fine." Later, he went public with his criticism. The iPhone's battery would not last a day for business users. It did not have a proper keyboard. It was a consumer toy, not a business tool. He was right about some of this. The first iPhone did have battery problems. It did not support corporate email systems. It had no copy and paste. But Balsillie missed the bigger picture. The iPhone was not competing with BlackBerry on BlackBerry's terms. It was redefining what a smartphone could be. While BlackBerry had built the perfect email machine, Apple had built a computer that happened to make phone calls. Web browsing that actually worked. A music player, a camera. Apps that could do almost anything. The cracks in BlackBerry's fortress were starting to show. Consumers who carried BlackBerry phones for work were buying iPhones for personal use. They carried two devices because they had to. But they preferred one over the other. The iPhone felt like the future. BlackBerry felt like work. And then Google announced Android. Now BlackBerry was not just competing with Apple. They were competing with every manufacturer who could license Google's operating system. Samsung, HTC, Motorola. The field was getting crowded. But BlackBerry's leadership was still confident. They had enterprise customers locked up with annual contracts. They had government security clearances. They had the best messaging system in the world. Next week, I have another story for you that I think you are going to find just as fascinating. Subscribe so you do not miss it. The signs were there. They always are. But success can make you blind to danger. By 2011, BlackBerry was still growing, but the foundation was cracking. They tried to fight back with the Playbook tablet. $499. Launched in April with great fanfare. It was supposed to show that BlackBerry could innovate beyond email. Instead, it showed how far behind they had fallen. The Playbook shipped without native email apps. Without BBM. The signature features that made BlackBerry were missing from their own tablet. It sold 500,000 units in the first quarter. The iPad sold 9.25 million in the same period. BlackBerry had to write down $485 million in unsold Playbooks sitting in warehouses. Do you remember BlackBerry? What is your memory? The co-founders, Lazaridis and Balsillie, were pushed out in January 2012. Their replacement was Thorsten Heinz, a German executive who promised to make BlackBerry the absolute best end-to-end mobile computing solutions company. Big words. But during his 22 months as CEO, BlackBerry lost 45 million subscribers. 5,000 employees were laid off. The company that had once seemed unstoppable was hemorrhaging users, money, and talent. Heinz bet everything on BlackBerry 10, a completely new operating system. They spent $100 million on a Super Bowl advertisement. Remember, it featured Alicia Keys as the company's global creative director. The Z10 flagship phone launched with promises of innovation and a fresh start. In the first quarter, it sold 1 million units. The iPhone 5 sold 37.4 million in the same period. 1 million versus 37 million. That ratio tells you everything you need to know about how this war was going. By fiscal 2014, BlackBerry posted a devastating $4.7 billion loss. They wrote down $1.6 billion in unsold inventory and bad investments. Another 4,500 employees lost their jobs. The company's global market share had collapsed to just 0.5%. 0.5%. A rounding error in the smartphone business they had once dominated. November 2013. John Chen became the new CEO of BlackBerry. His job was not to restore the company to greatness. His job was to figure out how to survive. Chen made a decision that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. BlackBerry would stop trying to compete with Apple and Google in the consumer smartphone market. They would become a software and services company instead. The pivot had begun. In October 2013, 6 years too late, BlackBerry finally released BBM as a free app for iPhone and Android. The messaging service that had once been their secret weapon was now available to everyone. 100 million people downloaded it in the first 6 months. It proved what many had suspected. BBM could have been WhatsApp. It could have been a standalone empire worth billions of dollars. But BlackBerry had kept it locked to their own devices for too long. By the time they set it free, the messaging wars were over. Others had won. The BlackBerry Priv, launched in November 2015, was the company's last attempt at making phones. It ran Android, not BlackBerry's own operating system. Even BlackBerry admitted they could not make their own software work anymore. The Priv kept the signature physical keyboard, but embraced Google's ecosystem. It was BlackBerry waving the white flag while trying to maintain some dignity. Fewer than 600,000 units sold globally. After 16 years of making phones, BlackBerry was done. In 2016, they licensed their name to TCL, a Chinese manufacturer. BlackBerry phones would continue to exist, but they would not be made by BlackBerry. The brand that had once defined mobile communication was now just a logo that someone else could use. Here is what nobody talks about: the speed of it all. In 2007, BlackBerry looked unstoppable. By 2016, they were out of the phone business entirely. 9 years. That is how long it took for a global empire to become a footnote. BlackBerry still exists. By 2022, they were generating $185 million in quarterly revenue from cybersecurity software and automotive systems. Their market cap was $2.9 billion. Not nothing, but a shadow of the $83 billion company they once were. They found a second life in the enterprise software business, helping other companies secure their data and communications. The expertise that once powered those encrypted government phones now protects corporate networks. There is also the patent portfolio. Over 38,000 patents related to mobile technology, security, and messaging, worth an estimated $1 to $3 billion. Every time you use a smartphone feature that BlackBerry invented first, there's a good chance they are still collecting licensing fees. The most interesting legacy might be the BlackBerry Mafia. Former employees who left to start their own companies. Over 1,000 startups in the Waterloo region alone. Companies like Kik, Thalmic Labs, and Applyboard. The collapse of BlackBerry scattered mobile technology expertise across the Canadian startup ecosystem. Failure became fertilizer for innovation. And this is the pattern I keep seeing. The same forces that make a company great can also destroy it. BlackBerry's obsession with security and keyboards made them dominant. But when the market shifted, that same obsession made them inflexible. They could not change because changing meant admitting they had been wrong about everything. What was lost? The idea that you could build a mobile empire from Canada? That keyboard typing could compete with touchscreens? That controlling the entire ecosystem was better than letting others innovate on your platform? BlackBerry proved all of these things could work. Until they could not. I walked into one of their stores in 1992. You could not have convinced me they would ever close. That is the thing about nostalgia. It makes you forget the cracks. Remember, this video is for educational purposes only. Always do your own research. If you found this story fascinating, make sure you are subscribed to Arthur Lee's Adventures. And in the comments, tell me, do you remember your first BlackBerry? What did it mean to you when everything felt possible?